it occurs to me that we need to be starting to speak about some of these policies as eugenicist adjacent.
I agree.
Because it's really just like, they don't say it explicitly, but it's this notion that survival of the fittest, and I'm the fittest because, I don't know, I take a bunch of testosterone shots.
Or I'm rich and privileged.
Or I'm rich and privileged, right? And yeah, exactly. I have bespoke healthcare. Yes, the United States does have the ability to produce the best healthcare in the world if you have the money to pay for it. For everybody else, well, you're screwed. I mean, we have tens of millions of people uninsured in this country, for example. That element is scariest to me, is the idea that there are folks like RFK Jr. and people that subscribe to it that they don't want to actually help people with disabilities or with diseases. They find them to be weak and want them to be on their own. It's libertarian and eugenicist adjacent.
Yeah, 100%. And what happened this week with autism, I think really also, again, hurts the cause. You had the CDC and so let me just kind of quickly kind of summarize the autism story. So as we know, or maybe we didn't, but the RFK basically commissioned the CDC that by September, right, we're going to find out what causes autism. I mean, that's a crazy, this is something that people have been working on for decades. But by September, and
he
great.
decrees it.
He's going to have a real shot at it. Finally,
right.
Okay, so we know
Sure.
I have a sense of what he's going to suspect causes autism. So what the CDC did is they released a paper that basically said, we've studied this, and what we are seeing is that the increasing incidence, the rates of diagnoses of autism is because we are getting better in looking for it. The ability to diagnose, the ability to define what autism, the autism spectrum scale, or the ASD, the autism spectrum disorder, which is basically a scale. We are able to better define what autism, maybe in the past somebody would have said that was mental illness, or maybe that was depression, or you're acting out, or what have you. We can now better define what this so-called scale or the spectrum is in terms of autism. Almost hours after that paper came out, he, in something that I don't think I've ever seen before, I've never seen this, that the health secretary then came out and then basically refuted what the CDC said by saying, no, this is toxins. And by toxins, I think that's a thinly veiled swipe at vaccines. And
right.
Certainly the email that went to my buddy, Doc Griggs, this morning also spoke about toxins. Again, thinly veiled swipe at vaccines as well.
But how is he? Well, let's play what he said yesterday about autism, which is the first clip that we should do here that's most relevant to what we're talking about.
We can take them in order maybe and start with the bit about the ideology of autism prevalence here. So
he also seems to not understand what autism even looks like based on this comment at the very least.
One of the things that I think that we need to move away from today is this ideology that the autism diagnosis, that the autism prevalence increases, the relentless increases, are simply artifacts of better diagnoses, better recognition, or changing diagnostic criteria. If you look at Table 3 of the ADDM report, it's clear that the rates are real, that they are increasing in the last 10 years, which is beginning with the first one. Year by year, there is a steady, relentless increase. I want to, because this epidemic denial has become a feature in the mainstream media, and it's based on an industry canard. And obviously, there are people who don't want us to look at environmental exposures. And so I want to just read you some of the.
Okay, so that was one part. Let's play this second part here, where he talks about kids with autism, how they're never going to pay taxes or use the toilet unassisted, which is just not accurate.
Which is also kind of weird.
well, let's
It's funny to
unpack.
start with paying taxes also.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the tax-
that's weird as well.
Right. I mean, true Republican in the
Yeah.
administration, I guess, like only
Yeah.
concerned about human beings if they can,
Pay
as
taxes,
taxpayers,
or
right?
think about their bathroom habits.
Yes. Well,
Getting weird.
I mean, RFK Jr. is not the most normal person, but this part, I think this is ableist. Let's hear what he says.
These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children, and we need to put an end to it. And I think I'm going to have Walter Zaharodny.
All right. So
It's so Orwellian.
this is a moral panic, right? Where he's conflating the increase in diagnoses because we're getting better at diagnosis and therapy with an increase in rates. And at the same time, they are placing the burden on, like, say, if you have a child with autism, they're saying that those parents basically functionally did something wrong. And he says they're trying to cure it, but he's being pseudoscientific and treating it as a binary and not acknowledging the spectrum that you just said. And then everything else, right, with the thinly veiled disgust that he has for people with autism, overplaying some of people's experiences or straight up lying about them, right, in order to make this claim. He's exploiting how people feel disempowered or maybe afraid if their child has this diagnosis by giving them this false notion that they have control over it, all the while destroying confidence in public health. The Marisol hasn't been in childhood vaccines for over 20 years. And that was what the initial claim was that was what was causing autism. Why is he even still on this if they've already tested this and thimerosal has been taken out and it had no effect on these rates?
Yeah, I think it just kind of feeds that narrative, that perpetual disinformation narrative. And you're right, thimerosal has been long gone. That was something I even at that point was like, oh, maybe that's a theory. Let's see what happens. Well, nothing happened. Like we're still seeing cases of autism. And there's two things. One is, I mean, somebody who you talk about, Greta Thunberg, and I have this in my mind because I've heard you say that her superpower, she refers to her autism, as her superpower. And again, I don't know her, but I hope that maybe she writes poetry and maybe she's gone on a date or two and what all the things refuting everything that he said.
I think she can go to the bathroom.
I didn't want to go there, but yes, I hope that she's living her life. I know plenty of people who have kids that have autism, and what he described. As I'm speaking these words right now, my toes are curled because I want to make sure that everything that I say is as close to accurate as possible, right? I mean, I dread saying something, especially in public, where I say something wrong. That's how most physicians, or probably most people, public figures who are experts in their fields probably feel. Certainly, I know that physicians do that. What he just did, with no self-respecting health and human services secretary would get up there and basically and like you said, it was an ableist. He just basically created in one fell swoop, one paintbrush, just described something that maybe exists in one small part of the spectrum of autism. But the fact that he just, basically by doing that, he just perpetuates this notion of misinformation, and it's shameful. And that he's the person standing up at that position. I never realized how powerful it was, because when it works right, those individuals usually kind of are invisible and they're just doing the right thing in the background. I now recognize the power of that position, because when somebody's not saying the right things or doing the right things, it actually hurts the population greatly.
What do you think about this war on peer review as a concept that he seems to be at the forefront of? Just this notion that scientific consensus is worthless and we should be trying everything and throwing everything at the wall. like those guys, the Weinsteins on the internet are a big part of this too, with their vaccine denialism, where they can't stand up to peer review, so they just attack the concept of peer review and science altogether. But these folks are getting rewarded by the Trump administration, not the Weinsteins in particular, and they've lamented that they're not included, because it's all about them. But like, this level of denialism is at the core of this project.
Yeah, well, I mean, because their ideas are false. And because their ideas are never going to be accepted by folks such as myself who do this for a living, right? We recognize that peer review is the gold standard. That's what we aspire to do. Every article I've ever written that had scientific claims in there, I want to be peer reviewed, because if I'm wrong, like I said a moment ago, I don't want to put something out there that could potentially be wrong or misleading. Peer review is what that is. I've been on the side where I've refereed articles, and I've written a number of articles. Peer review is the gold standard. But think about it. By taking it down, all you're doing is you're helping to take down a major pillar that the greatness of this country once was, and that was our science. Our science standards were so high. Our medical standards were so high. The CDC was the jewel of the earth. There are so many other CDCs around the world that are emulating the CDC that we have here, the work that is being done, that was being done here. And one thing that I'm hearing quite a bit is this major brain drain. We're hearing from scientists and people who do research are potentially leaving the country to continue the research elsewhere because grants are being shut down. I know of a number of HIV projects that are in New Orleans that are being shut down right now because they were being done using federal grants. I have several clinics that are federally funded. I don't know what my funding is going to be. One thing that I say, and I know who your audience is, so I feel comfortable saying what I'm about to say. I think once people recognize that undocumented individuals who are living with HIV are fully covered under Ryan White stuff, I think that's the first to go, and I say that fearful that...
Well, they did it with USAID. There are horror stories.
100%. Do you know what it costs to keep somebody alive? So it costs 12 cents per day per person for HIV medications. 12 cents per day. So to keep a child alive, we're talking about, was that like a couple dollars a month?
Yep.
Is that like what? That's $36 a year?
It's less than $1 a week.
Right. That's all it costs. Yeah. I'm not a math surgeon either, so I don't know.
I'm horrible at math. Yeah. I don't know why I try.
But the point is that it's really the destruction again, and I have to keep going back to this notion of they're purposely trying to accelerate a collapse.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else that would describe why we're seeing such a rapid destruction and deconstruction of our public health system.
But then the question is, what's the motive except to privatize?
I think moving us quicker into network cities.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think there will be one city where no vaccines at all. I could see another city would be like, oh, we're well vaccinated. But to come here, you're going to have to accept a lower rung in society. I don't know. I'm starting to kind of think through some of these things as to what this could potentially look like. And Prospera is a scary place. That was exactly what Naomi Klein has been talking about. That's already there in Roatan, which is one of the 3 islands that are right off of Honduras. And Prospera takes a huge part of that island, and which is basically a privatized area that, what she was talking about, this lawsuit, the government of Honduras are like, you guys have to go. And they basically said they levied a $14 billion lawsuit or something that would completely destroy Honduras as a country. And they can do that because they have the money and the wherewithal to be able to do something like that.
Yep.
I'd just say that dynamic is also part of Quinn Slobodian's book last year, Crack Up Capitalism. He talks about that colony and just the desire by Peter Thiel type folks to basically secede from they're secessionists.
Yeah.
I want your perspective on this tweet here. I've been pretty frustrated with the anti-vax movement. This is from Grace Thorvaldsen, who was on Left Reckoning earlier this week. She says, a significant sect of the modern anti-vax movement is born out of ableist parents rejecting their autistic children and directing blame toward inarguably effective modern medical practices instead of just being good parents.
So it's funny. That was the second point I was actually going to bring up, and we got
sidetracked.
Yeah, we got sidetracked, but that's a great point. So I think that, and again, well-meaning parents, I'm not a parent, but I can imagine what it's like to be a parent. Well-meaning parents love their child. child seems to be doing well, then all of a sudden something happens to that child. Rather than believing that it's genetics, that it's just likely that was just part of the development of that child, there's this idea of, well, no, something happened to that child, and that was out of my control, rather than possibly accepting the fact that life is life, and that this is just, when genetics when genes reassort themselves during recombination, these are the things that happen, and so that's something I 100% agree with and really believe in, and I feel bad for these parents. I really do. Like, my heart goes out to them. They love their child. They want to see their child have a date or write a poem or do the things that they were talking about.
But it's hard as hell. It's difficult because we don't have the societal safety net and structures to help these people, because we don't have socialized healthcare.
Yeah.
And that is what all of this is about. MAHA, this whole movement is exploiting the anxiety that people feel when they have to interact with the medical system, whether it be with a doctor or with a hospital. And so when you don't feel like you have control over the for-profit healthcare system, and that it could bankrupt you if you have cancer or get into an accident, what are you going to do? You're going to try to seek out somebody that sells you something that makes you feel empowered.
And that's why I think people actually believe in some of that misinformation. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Peter Offit, who's a vaccinologist, has this great story that he tells about how he was doing a vaccine clinic. He's a pediatrician, and he does vaccines. He creates vaccines. He was his wife was she's a nurse. She was drawing up the vaccines. The next kid was sitting on mom's lap. He was just getting ready to give her a vaccine when the child had a seizure. The child had a seizure before that child got a vaccine. Okay, that was the first time the child had an epileptic, expression. Child went to the hospital. Child did fine. Everything was fine. And the cautionary tale he tells is this: what would have happened if that kid had had a seizure 30 seconds after he gave that vaccine? Forever in that mom's mind, you would never be able to peel away how that vaccine and that seizure were intricately linked. And so I think those are the sorts of things. And when we as a society are becoming less and less media literate and science literate, which I think also is part of an intent as well, I think you can believe in stories much easier. Again, this misinformation, and because, as we know, it like I said, it travels the internet, it circles the world 6 times before the truth can put its pants on.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.